Welcome to Short and to the Point, a podcast from the Comeback in Awful Announcing. Here's your host, Jessica Kleinschmidt.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Short and to the Point. I know I say it every episode, but I'm very excited about this one. It's a very special episode because it's the season wrap-up of the 2023 year. I am so thankful. I take a step back to think about all of the guests we had. And what we wanted to do was do a best of episode. Compliments to producer Philip for setting this up, because there was a lot of cool stuff that not only I learned this season, but I think you guys learned as well, in relationships that I have built. And the curious Jess got to ask the questions that she was dying to know. Now, we started off the year with Jared Carrabis. He went from Barstool Sports to DraftKings, and he was really excited to see what he was able to do on his own without the Barstool background. Along the way, we had WWE superstar and hopefully one of my new best friends. I'm working on a relationship. Raquel Rodriguez stopped by. She was very close to the late Bray Wyatt. So it was good to see, not only have her stop by, but hear about the relationship she had with somebody who was so beloved in WWE, but also taught her a lot as well. And he was very pro women in wrestling. So we love that. Former Blue Jays manager John Gibbons stopped by as well. We know the bat flip of José Bautista heard around the world was something that every baseball fan and then some loved. So I asked him about that, because how can you not remember all of those situations, or that specific situation? Not to mention the fact he said it was a career highlight for him. And what a wonderful human being to go from a manager to creating content. It's definitely an interesting transition. Rich Hollenberg, we remember that very infamous case of Aaron Hernandez, the trial, the case itself, everything that went in before and around it. One of the best tight ends of all time found himself in a very tricky situation. Unfortunately, he did pass, but Rich Hollenberg was one of the first people to be on the ground and covering that case. So it was good to hear from him. And it's definitely an episode you guys are going to have to go back to listen to, especially if you are somebody who wants to eventually be in this industry. I highly suggest that when it came to foul territory, the one and only Scott Braun, who I don't think has had a carb in the last 10 years. I picked his brain, not just about baseball media itself, but what's it like to work with the wonderful and interesting AJ Pierzynski. We also had Sean Salisbury stop by, a good friend of mine over the years. I love him because no matter what the their football question is, he helped me out, which I was very, very thankful for. And he's also like a Hollywood figure and good friends with Adam Sandler. So why not? He talked about the beginning of sports debate shows and his long-time relationship with the late John Clayton and how they started off. And now sports debate is a huge thing in sports media. So without further ado, here are those conversations. Before that, you were with Barstool, and I loved that podcast, not just because I like you mentioned, it had my boy Dallas, but also you even it out with the comedic relief and everything else. But now you're on a different platform. What was that transition like?
It was very rewarding, because when you're a Barstool, it kind of gets beaten into your brain that you're just a product of the machine, and that without the machine, you're not anything. And I mean, it was a year last month that we launched Baseball is Dead, and we're rivaling all the biggest podcasts. It's just us. Obviously we're paid by DraftKings, but they are just for the first time launching a media section of their company. There's no mothership that's pushing us to help us get out there. It's just us. Mm-hmm. And with that, we are still I think last week we were the number 2 baseball podcast after a year, because the way that the algorithm works is if you're a brand new podcast, they push you to the moon, you jump up the rankings. Some people game the system in other ways, but it's literally just us. It is us versus the world. And it's super rewarding when you kind of like look at it all, your hard work and having those self-doubts, like I feel like there are plenty of self-doubts in that regard where you think, I don't know if I can do this on my own. Are they right that we need them and not the other way around? But it just hasn't been the case.
So that self-doubt is still happening in your career despite, I mean, your resume speaks for itself. That's still occurring to you in your career right now.
Not anymore.
Okay.
I think, when you're making that jump, like I thought I was going to be at Barstool for the rest of my life. It didn't work out that way. But I think, if you're like competitive or you want to be the best in the world at something, you have to take that leap. And I mean, like, yes, admittedly, like it would bother me when people were like, "Oh, you're Dave's bitch," and like you'd be nothing without Dave. I'm like, and in my head, I'm thinking like that's not true, but I can't prove it. How do I prove
Right.
that? So yeah, like getting the opportunity to kind of like step out on our own here. Like obviously having the backing of DraftKings is great for, I guess, like credibility standpoints. Like, yeah, like a major sports book is down with these guys. But just from kind of getting an audience, like, hey, come on over, check us out. Like that's a hard thing to do on your own, but we're doing it. Like the podcast is, I mean, it's us and John Boy really like at the top.
Yeah, and that's actually, I was going to ask, like, I feel like that's kind of the playing field at the moment. But you said, you thought you were going to work at Barstool for the rest of your life. Would you have been okay with that?
Yes and no. Like I think I was comfortable there. I was happy there. Like there's definitely that dynamic of your coworkers are almost like your second family. You spend so much time together, especially after the move to New York.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were not from New York. We all kind of came there and didn't have anyone else besides each other. So there was that like, hey, like this is like a family type deal. So that part, like I do miss, like I miss the people, but I think I always would have wondered, like, can you do it on your own? Like, are you a product of the company or are you a product of your hard work? And I think it's a combination of both. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that, I mean, we would be doing what we're doing right now if I wasn't at Barstool first.
Yeah.
I know that Barstool helped me a ton. But there are definitely examples of people who go there and work there and move on and you never hear from them again. And there are examples of people who go there, move on, and they become even bigger stars. I'm not going to sit here and compare myself to Pat McAfee, but I think that we fall into the category of someone that worked there, moved on, and are in a better spot. Like I feel like we are in a better spot now because I'm not gonna like get into how other people feel about the Barstool brand. They obviously have a ton of diehard fans, but there are a lot of people that hate Barstool. And that always bothered me, where people wouldn't give me a chance because of things that were said or done by other people. I was like, that's not fair. And they'd be like, well, you take a paycheck from that company and you know what the company's all about and blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm like, dude, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's where I work. Like, judge me for what I say and what I do. So that was another thing about kind of moving on was now I have the opportunity to be judged based on like what I do and what I say versus what other people do and what they say. Like I hated that so much.
Now, before I let you go, on the same energy, I'm currently recording this podcast. I'm so thankful for Awful Announcing and the Comeback for giving me this platform and this opportunity. But, I'm also on the A's broadcast. I also am writing and stuff. And the reason why is because of Melanie Newman. And I want you to tell the story about, the conversation we had right before MLB.com called me and my career essentially took off.
I will never forget it for as long as I live, because we have both kept each other in this industry when we have both been 2 seconds away from walking out the door. And every day, I don't think people understand. I love being here. There's always one good thing a day that I can kind of pick out and go, you know, this is just the coolest. This is where I'm supposed to be. But it doesn't make it hard. And we mentioned being a woman in the space earlier. And when you get an opportunity that's this big, what they don't really tell you about being a minority having that opportunity is it almost feels like you're on a conveyor belt and you're going to go through all these different experiences, but you can't get off, because then if you get off, everything behind you falls apart. And that's including the women and the girls that are trying to do the same thing that we're doing. And so it's this constant pressure to constantly show up and perform, and you're just stuck in this space. But again, it's a good thing. It just doesn't mean that it's not without problems. Everybody has problems. You just pick which problems you're willing to deal with. And you had kind of been up and down through some jobs. I was still gutting it out in the minor leagues, and we formed our relationship on Twitter because that's what you did in 2010 when you could actually still use Twitter. Yeah. And you were done. You were pretty done. You couldn't find the next job you wanted to move on to. You had done gambling and betting, and you were trying to write here and there, and you weren't being taken seriously. And you just said, you know, I think I'm going to find something else. And I just wasn't willing to accept it at all, because you were the one person I had in the space who was like me. And, you know, if you quit, I quit. You jump, I jump, Jack. And I don't really want to quit right now. So you're not allowed to quit, because I don't know what else to do. And I'm so glad that we were able to be honest with each other in that space, and to death grip onto you and to make you keep showing up for a couple more days. Because I think, wasn't it literally like the next morning that
it was either hours or like the next day?
Yeah. I mean, it was within 24 hours that you ultimately found out that you were getting your next job opportunity, and it was a national platform, and you thrived and you grew that big enough to make the leap to the next level. And I remember, God, I think it might have been Frisco, when I found out that I was not being brought back while spring training was already underway. And I thought that was kind of the end of the line for me. You know, all the jobs are already taken. It's mid-February. And you just kept encouraging me that I had to stay here because I didn't let you quit. Now you won't let me quit. And the chips fell where they were. A guy who had just accepted a job left that job for a different job, and I swooped in and told them I would basically work for free.
Yeah.
And you know, that launched everything, and I finally got a national break there. But I'm not here without you by a long shot, in many, many ways. And I don't think I ever forget that, ever.
Yeah, me neither. And same thing. I mean, we're very thankful for the opportunities, but it can get hard and it can get lonely. And if it wasn't for you and Dani, like literally this situation right now, talking on this platform would not be happening. So before and after everything, I just want to say thank you once again. And I'm one of those people who likes to thank people publicly. So I wanted to thank you a million times once again, my dear friend.
You're the best.
Bray Wyatt unfortunately passed away recently. I know he made not just an impact on the wrestling world, but you yourself. Talk a little bit about your relationship with him and how much of an impact he made on you.
Yeah, you know, he was such an innovator, and I think that I speak for everyone when I say that. And everything everyone has said about him is true. He was so humble and so kind and so willing to just make you feel comfortable as well, and chat with you if you needed to chat. And his family was beautiful too. I mean, JoJo was just so happy all the time, just so amazing. Every time I could see her backstage, I'd go and talk to her just because she's such a light, and their beautiful kids were just so fun to play with. It's been hard on a lot of people in the WWE community, but I can say that everybody's really come together and just kind of checked on everyone and made sure everyone's okay and handling this in the best way possible.
You know, watching the WWE community from the outside, I feel like even if it's not anything negative or bad, but just something like this brings y'all so close together. But you guys are so ridiculously close. And I know it's because you guys travel together, you do everything together. That's really got to be amazing. It's like an extension of your family.
It really is. You build relationships with people that they become your sisters. They may not be blood, but they're your sisters and your brothers. And we all go through the same trials and tribulations with the roller coaster that is WWE in our lives. And it's hard being away from your own family. You know, I am very close with my family, as I know a lot of other people are too. And we miss things like birthdays and celebrations and all the other fun things that you should be sharing with your family. We have to miss those sometimes because we're a sport that goes year round, nonstop WWE action. You can find us 365 days a year. So they do become an extension of your family, and you do build relationships with these people. And it's really cool to know that you always have someone to talk to hug, to go to if you need advice or if you just need to vent, and just someone who has your back.
You mentioned Bautista. He's very much a villain. This was a term he used. And I can't talk about Bautista unless we talk about that iconic bat flip, the 2015 ALDS. And you said on your or I think you were a guest on a podcast, but you said it might have been the best moment of your managerial career. But it couldn't have been anybody else to do that because it was Bautista himself. So tell me about the moment and why it needed to be Bautista in that bat flip scenario.
Well, Jessica, you know what? He, we had a group of guys, you throw Encarnacion in there, even Josh, kind of late bloomers in their career, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think all of them had that edge, and all of them had that little chip on their shoulder because, you know, Bautista was a journeyman and never got an opportunity until he came to Toronto, and Encarnacion, the same thing. And then Josh, you know, he was a late bloomer. So they all play with that. They all play with that edge, right? But Bautista, you know, José was the face of the franchise for a number of years. Led the league in home runs a couple of times on a team that did absolutely nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was basically his team. Even when Josh came over there, you know, and some of the other guys, it was still Bautista's, you know, team. And just the fact that he had been there so long, he had so much success at the team. You know, it's all about the team winning. When he did that, Josh could have hit that home run. I don't think he would have had the same effect. You know, right. any of them, right? And because you know this was José's moment, right? That he's Mr. Blue Jay. He's never been to the postseason. You know, the game, you know, the season's on the line, right? It's game 5. You got to win that one. And it was just, I don't know how to describe it other than it was just meant to be. It was supposed to be him because everything that led up to that, his reputation in the game. You know, if he's outside of our team, he wasn't liked at all. He's probably the number one guy, number one villain. Josh might have been number 2, but José was number 1, right? And so it just, and we were our team. Our team, we were known as whiners, complainers, because we'd whine about the strike zone, but our guys were usually right, you know. But you know what? They'll get that reputation. So that's kind of, you know, just kind of who we were, and he was kind of the leader of the pack. And you know, been 23 years since they've been to the postseason, and now we get over that hump. And if we would have bowed out in that first round, because when Anthopoulos made all those deals to bring, you know, to really set us on fire that year, if we'd have bowed out in that first round to the Rangers, you know, it would have been wow. Probably all been forgotten, right? Yeah. But so it was magnitude of the situation, that inning, you know, the way it started on a crazy throwback to the mound by Russell Martin, everything just built up to that point, you know. And so yeah, obviously it's the greatest moment of my career. You know, we finally won something. It was my first playoff experience as a manager. Yeah, pretty crazy.
The Aaron Hernandez story, the trial, all of it. I listened to a podcast that you were on, and you essentially got a call saying like, "Hey, can you stay in the Boston area and cover this scenario?" They didn't even know all the details yet. And when it comes to sports and news, this particular instance, sports was such a minute part of it. So how do you, I guess, approach that when it comes to covering a news story where sports really don't matter in that case?
Another fantastic question. First of all, I go all the way back to my education at Syracuse. When I was a freshman and a sophomore in the Newhouse School, I was like everyone else, chomping at the bit to get on TV. And at that point, they had student-run television station. It was called UUTV. at the time. It is nowhere near the monolith that it is now. It's called Citrus TV now. They had great radio stations. I could go over the laundry list of sportscasting legends who went through the radio station at Syracuse. I was not one of those guys because, remember, I didn't want to do play-by-play at the time, or I didn't think I wanted to do play-by-play at the time. So I took, even at Syracuse, I took a little bit of a different path than most traditional or orthodox careers that you would know about. But the one thing I did do, because I had to as a student there, I learned how to write and I learned how to news gather, whether I was going to be a news reporter or a sports reporter or an entertainment reporter. The basics, the fundamentals of gathering news and writing about it for broadcast remain the same. And they remain the same to this day, right? Keep it short, keep it simple, lead with the best thing you have. All of those elements that I learned as a freshman and a sophomore, and then into my junior and senior year in college, I attributed 20 years later when I got this Aaron Hernandez assignment. And it was awkward for me. I was working for the NFL Network at the time. And like you said, I got a call, hey, instead of flying home, could you go up to Boston? I was like, okay, why? Well, something's going on with Aaron Hernandez. We're not quite sure what it is. Remember, at the time, the Patriots were the Patriots, right? It was Tom Brady. Yeah. They were winning Super Bowls. Aaron Hernandez was arguably one of, if not the best tight end in football. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. I get to hang with the best team in football, with this dynasty. Little did I know that I was going to be spending the next 10 days camped out outside of Aaron Hernandez's house. As it ends up, I was the first reporter on national television to have the story on the air when Aaron Hernandez was taken out in handcuffs. I had CNN to one side of me. I had Good Morning America to the other side of me. That was as disturbing as the whole scenario was. Mm-hmm. I also knew in the back of my mind, this was going to be one of the most memorable moments of my career. And I just remember thinking, don't screw up the story. Just report the facts. I was not there to give my opinion. I was not there to color it in a way that it wasn't. All I was there to do was report the facts and give the latest updates that I was receiving. So again, to your point, I had to do things that I wasn't used to doing as a sportscaster. I had to go talk to police officers and detectives and be as enterprising a reporter as I could possibly be. You go into a clubhouse, and you know this better than anybody, Jess, a 162-game baseball season, halfway through the season, if not earlier, you are scrounging for fresh story ideas, right? It becomes the dog days of summer really quickly in a 162-game baseball season. Well, I had a story in front of me that I knew I had to cover, but I also knew everyone else was covering. So how was I going to make the NFL Network's coverage that much more compelling when no one was expecting that from the NFL Network? We are covering sports. We are not covering a murder investigation. So I relied on all the tools that I was given at Newhouse as a college student. And thank goodness I relied heavily on my broadcast writing skills. And I kept it short and I kept it essential. And everything worked out from the broadcast perspective for me, and got, really tremendous feedback on the job I did. Would I ever want to do that again? No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Where on the scale do you think we are as far as women in sports? And I'm gonna make this more specific. Women in baseball, I feel like we have it more difficult because of the sport that we cover. I would say, like, on a scale of 1 to 3, where are we as far as embracing women and covering this game?
3 is most embraceful.
Yeah.
I'd say we're at a 2.
Okay.
I think, maybe that's the lame answer. I definitely don't think we're at a 1. I think we've come a long way. We have a lot farther to go. We need more women and female voices, I would say, in higher positions,
Mhm.
right? We need more women on the radio. We need more women in broadcast booths. We need more women who are covering the game as beat reporters. It's a
Yeah.
really hard job. You know everything about it. I know nothing
Yeah.
about being a beat reporter. I just watch you guys in awe and bow down because I could not do that for 162. I truly
Yeah.
could not do it. I'm not made for it, and I know that, but I think that we need more women who want to do those jobs, who are encouraged, who know about the job. I think that's important. Knowledge, right? And exposure to the job. I think we've got some ways to go in that regard. And I think what's tough, like, people aren't as used to hearing female voices in
Mhm.
those high places. And they're going to have to get used to it eventually. They'll get
Yeah.
there, like everyone else will get there. But I think that the more they hear us, the louder we roar, right? And that we're here and we're not going anywhere and we've planted our roots, that we'll get to the 3. I know we'll get to the 3, 100%. It's never going to be perfect. It's probably going to
Yeah.
be 2.99999, right? Like, it's
Right.
never going to be right there. But I don't care about that. We did that women's equality piece for SNY last month. I think it was 2 months ago. And like, the point I like love to hammer home is that people think that we want more or
Yeah.
extra or anything of that sort, anything that is an adjective to more than above. We just want the exact same. We want to
Right.
exist in the space and get paid what we deserve, get paid the same as our counterparts, and get treated the same and get the same opportunities. We're not asking for more. We're here. Like, we're not going anywhere. I'm not going to go do another job because, Johnny Joe in his basement who's picking his nose doesn't like to hear a woman. I'm not going
Yeah.
anywhere, but I would like equality. I would like that to be equal. And I think we're still pushing for that in certain spaces, but I know we're going to get there. And it's because, we had people before us, we have us. I know we're doing our damnedest and we're doing our part and we're paying it forward. And that's going to lead to the 2.999.
And it's interesting you brought that up because it sounds so simple as like treat us equally as far as the opportunities. I feel like there's been situations I've been in where they don't want, and in their defense, they don't want it to be too showy, like, oh, we're hiring her because she's a woman. Because I don't believe that I'm at that point in my career where I can say they can confidently say that. So they do too less to where it's like, okay, well, we'll just like let her be. I'm like, well, it's still the first freaking woman to do this. Like, maybe do something. So that's interesting, like that they can't show about that, but that's a whole thing. Why are we no longer at a 1 on that scale?
Well, we have more women who are in positions of power and who are then able to hire other women, right? If there's nobody in the job who looks different, sounds different, comes from a different background, we're never going to make any changes, right? That's why diversity is of the utmost importance. If you don't have, it's not just a baseball thing, right? It's like a life thing. If you don't have different voices and a variety of people who, like, I work in a space, in the amateur space, where I was just sitting with Charles Johnson, right? I think 3-time Gold Glove winner, World Series winner with the Marlins, catcher. And we were talking about Black catchers in the game. And this is a much larger conversation, but
Yeah.
there is a lack of African-American catchers in the game. And you could go into great detail about that. And Charles was so proud to represent something that younger kids could see and could know. A Black kid can grow up and be a catcher and have that position and not be moved from that position, because that's what happens.
Yeah.
And so I think that along the same lines of women, we're in higher positions, our voices are in different places. We have advocates who don't care that we're a woman doing the job. We're good at our job. We just happen to be a woman. And so it helps because we are able to diversify the voices and what it looks like. You look at Kim Ang, right? The first female general manager to take her team to the postseason, right? And so now you have kids and her background who say, wait, Kim looks like me. I can do that job. As somebody who looks like me can do that job. That's what we have to have more of. There has to be more of that, and there have to be more people above us who want to hire women, who invest in women, who think that our presence is important and our voice is important, and that it's important to make sure that when someone's watching you, that they look at you and say, that person looks like me. I can do that job. I think that's the key. That's why we're not at a 1 anymore. And man, we're freaking pushing that door down. I think it's great. We're not there, but that's okay. And it takes time. When you are a force to be reckoned with, it takes time.
I think we're no longer at a place where we can say she's good for a girl. She's just good. And that I feel is huge for me personally. I hated saying, oh, she's not bad for a girl. Like I could just be like, just not bad, or she's good. Period.
She's good. She can do the job. Mm-hmm. Right? Like how crazy is that? I mean, yeah, I feel like we're probably a little behind in that sentiment. And I wish we'd been saying that a few years ago, maybe a decade ago. But yeah, we are getting to that point. That's freaking awesome that we can say things like that now. And you watch, Lauren Shahadi is my favorite example of watching her on the sidelines in the postseason. And like, I go to school, I text her and I'm like, I'm going to the school of Shahadi right now, taking notes on how she does things. And there's nobody better, no person better than her on the sidelines in baseball in the postseason. That's a fact. Nobody better than her. And it doesn't matter that she's a woman. She is the best at her job.
What's it like working with AJ Pierzynski?
Next to him almost every day. Actually sitting in his seat right now. Hi, AJ. You had a better background. So it's awesome. He's a great teammate. He is reliable, super opinionated, passionate, and cares about what we're doing. And I think also he cares about the topics that we're covering, right? This isn't just a job for him. And also, I mean, he's watching games and talking like this anyway in life. Now he gets to actually do it for the world on a daily basis versus just doing, say, his game of the week that he would do all season. So I think he has the same mindset of, say stuff, right? He was like that as a player, and he tells players that sometimes too. Like, say it, it makes you more relatable. And yes, there, especially younger players that are worried about a contract extension or something like that. Some of them are going to be a little more careful or tiptoe. And also, you don't want to throw someone under the bus that's your teammate. It's not necessarily what he's saying, but he's just like, just be yourself. It comes up across better. And that's what he does. And he'll say, like, love it or hate it. And also often doesn't give a shit what people think about his answers. And that's important. For us, we want to, like I'm saying, our whole team at Foul Territory, we want to work with people that are not incredibly concerned about every word that comes out of their mouth, like so calculated that they're worried about their next job or anything like that. Like, if I worked with them and auditioned them in a team job or at a league job, it's the kind of people that they'd be like, they're too real. We don't want them. Like that's who you want. So and most people have that in them. I think AJ does an exceptional job of bringing that out of people. And I think that he has a really clever way of stirring the pot without it feeling fake. Yeah. It's more like if you hear a BS answer from a player, I'm not going to say anything for the most part. He does. He'll go, bullshit, dude. That was a dumb move. I played like that's perfect because that's what everyone wants to say. And he has the respect of players because he had over 2,000 hits and he works his ass off and he knows what he's talking about. So I love it. He's a dude. I mean,
he is a dude for sure.
Yeah. Some Cubs fans might feel differently about him, but they just don't know. And if you came out and had a beer with AJ, then you'd probably be like, okay, my mindset has completely changed about that guy.
And what's interesting is before I ever went on the show with y'all, I had and it was before anybody told me anything about him, but when Mark Kotze is your manager and you spent a lot of time with AJ Pierzynski, and Kotze doesn't have a mean bone in his body. And he just said, he's like, Pierzynski's like a great guy and he's a great teammate to have. They burnt their bats on the foul lines because they needed a reset with their hitting. And that's Pierzynski's the guy you call to do that. That's the guy you call. Can we go put our bats on fire because I can't hit right now?
His stories are never ending, right? And you want that, and you want stories that are also like relatable to the current game where he's still playing with guys that he has incredible, moments with in life. And obviously he has many relationships with players that are coming on our show that he either played with or is friendly with, like Scherzer and Wainwright and some of these guys that are important voices in the game that want to speak like this. So I think that part's clutch too. But oh my gosh, he has never ending stories. And when I say doesn't hold back, I mean, let's keep in mind, played for the White Sox for a while, still does, events and things for them and with them, but also just tells it like it is. Like, White Sox had a dumpster fire season. Let's not beat around the bush. It's cool. And we can get like really deep on what went down there. And that's important too. And that's good for his credibility. I think for most people, and that's the one thing we're trying to stand out with is, yeah, sure, we're bringing on tons of players, but we're just going to be real about what the situation is. We also have brought on many managers, execs, whatever, right? So you're just, as long as people just know that it's not like someone's in his ear or someone's in my ear or whatever about what we're saying, then I think the respectability is there, because obviously everyone in life has bias in some form. But this isn't just like a, player focused PR spin. Like, if you look up what we've done, it's, I would say, quite neutral in terms of how we're covering the game.
And one thing that was interesting, and I noticed it when the A's, when they were making their wild card runs a few years back, you would see ESPN pop up. And I don't want to say out of nowhere, that's just how the coverage goes. And you mentioned it a little bit. How do you make local fans happy when you're on a national broadcast, or is that possible?
I think it's possible, but never fully. Not everybody, is going to be happy about it. And part of that is just, they're going to come in saying, I don't care. I don't care who it is. I don't care which broadcaster it is. I don't like them. That's right. How some people are going to be. And it's more prevalent in baseball than any other sport. And the reason is obvious. It's pure volume. It's pure numbers. It's twice the length of a hockey or basketball season. And the games typically, although obviously this year that it changed a little bit, but still for the most part, the games are longer. So you are just straight up spending more time with your broadcast team. Yeah. And no matter what, you will not make the entire local market happy. And that's something you just kind of have to accept as a national baseball announcer. Now, the ways that I feel like I've worked to mitigate that somewhat, I think we have a tendency on the national side to go too big picture. And I think the more kind of local we can make it feel, especially like game to game, I think the better off we are. And again, our job, frankly, if we prepare properly and research properly, I think the national baseball job is a little bit easier, because we're not deep diving on every single aspect of the organization. But the big thing for me is to try to be as recent as possible. And you were asking about process earlier, Jess, and I've changed my baseball process the last couple of years to really try to focus in on during the regular season, at least on that week. What's happening that week and the prior week. What's really happened the last 3 or 4 series, because that's the stuff that's freshest in the minds of local fans too. And then if you can connect those dots to some of the overarching storylines that a team comes in with at the beginning of the season, then great. But you're never going to know as much as the local people do, obviously. And again, I know that I am a local guy, so I see it. I see fans of the Bulls complaining when they are on national TV. Well, this broadcast doesn't know or whatever. And I'm like, guys, it's just not the same. It's not that's the point. It's supposed to be the national perspective. I think the one thing that upsets me is the word bias. I think that's what frustrates me as a national broadcaster.
I was going to ask you about that too. It's something that your job as a national broadcaster when it comes to being biased or unbiased.
Yeah. And I think as I've thought about these things more often, I've come to realize that there is no such thing as an objective broadcast, because the game itself is not objective, especially when you're only coming in for one. You're coming in for that one game, you're parachuting in, or even just for that one series. You're just covering the ebbs and flows of that day and of that series. You're not there to frame everything in the perspective of, like we did Astros Twins. It's not my job to frame everything in the perspective of an Astros fan who, when they watch Todd and Blummer on, a Tuesday in June, everything is framed in the context of, well, how does this affect the team that you watch 100 50 times a year, 140 times, 130 times with your broadcast crew. Like, that's their job. They're doing their job properly. And we're trying to do our job properly by just covering the ebbs and flows of what happens that day. And when it is 1 out of 162, or it does get boiled down to a 5 or 7 game series, it's really hard to convince people that, well, you're not biased against the team. I am biased towards the score and towards the waves of the game. If a team is playing really, really well, we're probably going to talk about them. If a team has 7 batters come up in 4 out of the 9 innings that they're up at the plate, of course the game's going to be biased, because the time that we're going to spend talking about that is going to be significantly more than the time we spend talking about the other team, because they're not on offense. They're not bringing up multiple players that we can discuss and connect dots to for story after story. It just doesn't happen. That's how the game gets covered when you're coming in from that parachuting perspective. And it's hard for fans, and it's not their job to know this, but it's hard for fans to contextualize that. And I can appreciate that. It gets a little bit frustrating when I keep explaining myself, but when I do explain myself, I think fans do understand it. I've interacted with people and said, hey, I get where you're coming from. Here's why it sounds this way. I gave you the psychological reason because of your connectivity to your own broadcast team, and I gave you the mechanical reason for us just covering what happens in those particular 9 innings or those 45 innings in a 5-game series. That's how we have to do the job.
So it sounds like they're embracing that.
I think you have to, you know, and again, like you said, to appeal to the local market, you try as much as you can to literally fall into the bushes that, you know, you're advancing through over the course of that season. You know, that field that you're advancing through that season, you try to plop yourself right in that spot, you know, between game 140 and 142. You're there for game 141. I will try to give you as much as I can as to what's happened from game 130 to game 140, because that's what you're probably thinking about most. And I'll try to connect it to the beginning of the year as best as we can, but trying to keep it where the game is at. It's a little bit different for baseball than it is for football or jumping in on an NBA broadcast in the national scope.
It always makes you think there's a wild card game, and I look up and there's an ESPN flag. A-Rod's next to me. Buster Olney's talking to Bo Mel, and I'm like, where were you guys all season? Where were you during June when like all the guys were crying? And then after I let that go, and then I started being part of national broadcast, I understood it. And you don't want to be phony, right? As somebody who's covering a different game, because you have to understand where they're coming from. But I'm glad that they're embracing it. Let's continue on the media aspect of your career, because when it comes to sports debate, you're one of the poster children of it, you and John Clayton. Right. Before we get into this sports debate topic, I know you were very, very close to Clayton, but what's it like being a friend of John Clayton?
I'm still, very few days go by, Jess, that I'm not still heartbroken over it. I can remember who I got the call from. A couple friends called, but the first one to contact, I was coaching a football camp last year, you know, not this past summer, the summer, but spring before. And Chris Mortensen called me. Mort and I are still tight. And he goes, I think he said, first, are you sitting down? I said, yeah. He goes, I had heard from that he wasn't doing well. Yet I see John and I would go on each other's show every week. So it was only a couple of weeks since I hadn't talked to him. But I had heard that, you know, because his wife, John, is such a, let me just put it to you this for people don't know John Clayton. If you called him up and said, John, I'm in the middle of the country, I need you to come here. I have an appearance and I can't do it without you. It's 5, you know, whatever. Somehow, some way, the guy would either find a way to do it or tell you why. I mean, why he could. He's the reason 4 Downs worked. I mean, I know I think, no disrespect to the others, because we got a lot of great media people, but I think John and I were proud of the fact that we were the original debate show. Before, as good as Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon on there, maybe 10 times better than us, we were the original debate show. So we used to brag, well, you can't do the original again. And John wore it proudly, and so did I. We loved it. We had a lot of great help and a lot of good topics, but John made it go because he was so clever. He was always prepared, and it worked. And it was one of the favorite parts of my 12 years at ESPN, among great people that I worked with. John Clayton's one of the finest human beings I've ever been around. He, you know, Pat wasn't doing well, his wife, and he was always husband first, sports second. But he'll go on, John, it doesn't matter. I tell people, I said, oh, you're in Pennsylvania? Call John. John will be a guest on your show, and he will. Loved talking it, and he had so much pride in this. I miss him every day. It was about a month and a half ago, somebody had said something on a show I was on, and it brought tears to my eyes, because people think that we scripted that. We never scripted those arguments. They would never. It was competition. We'd check in, clock in, beat each other's brains in, and clock out and love it. Never. We did not script that. And John was one of my dearest friends. That was real stuff, but it was also respect, because I respected how long he'd done it. And the first time I met him, he was a beat writer in Seattle in my rookie year. And all those years later, we were partners. So while we're proud of it, and we got a lot of great debate shows now, but we're proud that it was an original and it was able to last. And I think we made a lot of people happy, but it couldn't have gone without John Clayton. And I miss him every day. I think about him every day, and what a phenomenal human being. And if you didn't get a chance to meet him, anybody out there, I can tell you that whatever you think good of him, multiply it times about 50. He's missed in the industry and a legend.
Yeah, and I can tell just by the way that you're talking about it.
Love him.
And you mentioned, it wasn't scripted. It was definitely a real debate. Do you think the reason why it was successful, the debates looked heated or sounded heated, what have you, is because there was a level of respect there?
Completely. We'd get on, be sitting on a Sports Center set a lot of times because John's going to different games every week, right? He'd be getting ready to do a feature on a Wednesday in Pittsburgh. And so they put him on satellite. We'd go on, but we'd get on and say, yeah, John, hey, how you doing, buddy? What they do is they'd ask us 10 or 12 questions each, separate from each other, and then they just pick the 4 or 5 they wanted for 4 downs. And so we'd come on and tee it up, but I'd talk to him before, and then we'd talk after, and then during the week. But we didn't take it personal, because people said, man, you got some zingers. I said, I got zingers. They said, that guy crushed me plenty of times.
Like, I'm trying to keep up with him.
Oh, there's no question. And it worked, because when they first approached us, Mark Shapiro and Mark Preisler, who was our senior coordinating producer, we got this like jock versus, bookworm nerd guy, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that affectionately towards John. I said, sure, let's do it. And it just flew. And I don't know why, but it wasn't hot take-ish. John and I talked on there, we were in a debate, and I couldn't have done. It's not in my nature. Now, passion, it's different than hot take. It'd be hard for me to go and say Brady's the 50th best quarterback of all time and try to sell that to you. I could sell he's the best quarterback of all time or best player of all time. So it wasn't a hot take. It was very passionate, but well thought out. And John Clayton I never had to worry when we quarterback talk. He may not know the intricacies of X's and O's like I did, but I don't know the contract status and the deep part of what he knew from a coach telling him about Brady or whoever else. So it worked. And we didn't manufacture disagreeing. Sometimes we agreed on the same subject, and it was passionate, but yes, the respect, and it worked. And for all the people out there, so you guys didn't get along. John and I, it was one of my favorite people of all the years I've been in the industry. And respect was the reason it worked. 2 things: respect, preparation, and passion for what we did. And I don't think it can be replaced. While people have tried, I still think that it was original, because nobody said, you say this, so he says that. That never happened. And I don't think John or I would have wanted that way, because I'm not good at that when somebody tells me what I have to say.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in this season. I'm going to call it a season because I can do that. That's what we do. And I love that baseball is like a calendar year, because other sports, they do 1 year and 1 year and they cross over and it's a hot mess, but I'm allowed to do whatever I want to do. As much as and thankful I am for everybody listening and those who tuned in, and of course my guests, I cannot go without thanking everybody behind the scenes, mainly producer Philip, who kept this boat afloat, dealing with all of my BS, whether it is a mic issue or just Jessica being Jessica. And of course, all the amazing people at Awful Announcing and The Comeback for giving me this amazing platform. Ben, who let me do this. I love podcasts. I have so many conversations that I will keep for the rest of my life, including we heard Melanie Newman and Dani Wexelman, my 2 best friends. They stopped by. I feel like it was very imperative to have them on the show, because there's always a space for women in sports. And I hope you guys support women in sports. That's a whole different podcast, but I'm very thankful that they stopped by as well. I will see you guys in 2024. 2023 was definitely the most trying year of my life personally. Career-wise, it was one of the best. So I'm very thankful for that. Once again, Philip, thank you so much for all of this. And for you guys listening, my loved ones, I love you very much, and we will see you next time.
Want even more short and to the point? Follow Jessica at Kleinschmidt JD and head over to thecomeback.com and awfulannouncing.com.